Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can find out more about how we're helping leading brands and retailers build content at scale and take advantage of our free content health audit at itsrapid.ai. My guest on today's show is Billy Courtney, Commerce Innovation Lead at Accenture. Prior to Accenture, Billy was head of digital partnerships at The Stable, a digital agency that was acquired by Accenture in 2022. Before that, Billy was a co-founder of e-commerce technology company RichContext, which was acquired by The Stable in 2020. Prior to founding RichContext, Billy was global e-commerce sales and marketing lead at the Coca company, customer supply chain lead at Nestle, and worked in logistics at Walmart. We discussed Billy's experience at some of the world's largest CPG brands and retailers, his experience as an entrepreneur, and what he's focused on for the next year and beyond. Please enjoy my conversation with Billy Courtney. Billy, great to see you.
Likewise, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Tell us what's on deck for the new year.
Yeah, so we got through the new year. Then I had a birthday, and we had a ski trip planned. And so now it's time to, a fresh new year. It's time to get to work. We're excited about that.
Excellent. Well, you've had a really remarkable career at some of the world's largest brands and retailers, including household names, Walmart, Nestle, Coca-Cola, and you co-founded your own digital technology company, RichContext. Take us back. How did you get your start in the industry?
Yeah, it's a rather curious start, actually. I graduated college in 2008, if you recall, in the throes of a subprime mortgage crisis. It was hard to get a job, actually. And I left college without one. And so I moved back home that summer and resumed my normal summer job, which was being a server at a restaurant, and moved back to Southern Missouri and was working at a place called Big Cedar Lodge, which, to be fair, I was making relatively good money as someone who is working at a restaurant on tips. And so, however, I knew a couple folks that had moved to Bentonville and took a job at Walmart headquarters. And so I decided I probably needed to make a jump and get into what would ultimately be my career. And so I applied at a couple of jobs. I got an interview at one and basically was offered the job the same day, saying like, hey, can you come to Bentonville? We're ready to bring on new talent. And took a job within Walmart logistics and transportation and started in that direction. So it's interesting too, though, in 2008, working at entry-level job in logistics, I was making about $13 an hour, a meaningful pay cut from what I was making as a server. And I kept telling myself that after taxes, each day I'm making less than $100. And so that's where it all started. The origin story of what's been about 15 years in retail, CPG, and kind of the digital agency life.
What is your takeaway from getting that first opportunity at Walmart? Obviously, that was then a leap from there to many, many other opportunities. Is the insight just go for it or take the jump, or, how do you think about that first big break, if you will?
Yeah, candidly, I was looking at jobs all over the country. One thing I knew is that I needed to leave home. I needed to do something that was uncomfortable. And my studies weren't in transportation and logistics. They were in marketing and business. And so it was something that I look back and I have no regrets, right? It was a curious move, but to spend a couple of years at Walmart and understand supply chain from their point of view, which is something they are fantastic at, and understand transportation and how freight moves from stores to distribution centers, and having that as a foundation for me has always been, the kind of the epitome of taking an uncomfortable situation and turning it into what was a solid foundation for what would be the rest of my career.
I love it. So, fast forwarding a little bit, you were at Walmart and then at Coca Cola, you were heading up global e commerce sales and marketing before you founded Rich Context. Talk to us a little about your time at some of these large brands like Coca Cola and Nestle. What was that experience like, and some of your learnings or insights from that time?
Nestle was my first move after Walmart, and what I'll tell you is that was probably where the bulk of my growth happened. I was not qualified for the job, and so I had convinced him I was in the interview process, and so there was a lot of on-the-job training and really just figuring a lot of things out. Kind of maybe those classes I skipped in college around how to use Microsoft Access and Excel, and had to teach myself a lot of complicated formulas and things like that to help kind of do my job a bit more efficiently. And then the story of Coca-Cola was just one of a lot of growth. So I was there for 5 years, was fortunate to be in a position to get promoted about 4 times along the way. And in the last couple of years there, I was actually working closely with our corporate venture capital group. And so we were investing in a lot of repeat founders, whether they're from Tel Aviv to Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And what we were trying to find was innovative people and ideas to help us kind of propel our business within e-commerce and our retailers' business forward as the leader in the category. And so, this was a time where I was probably one of the first like e-com specific hires that Coke ever had, right? So how do you sell heavy, low margin beverages online was something we were trying to figure out in a world where pickup and delivery wasn't so prevalent yet. And so kind of by being introduced to a lot of these founders along the way, there's one thing that I think just stood out to me, which was these people aren't that special, right? There's not like a unique, genetic makeup that makes you a founder or not, or an entrepreneur or not. And so, and it took me some reps to figure that out. So at some point I figured, why not me? Right? Like, why can't I do it? Right? If you take a step back and you assess your everyday job and you see opportunities and those opportunities don't have a solve, why can't you be the one that solves that? And so, especially when you know there's built-in scale. If it's a problem for Coca-Cola at a retailer like Walmart or Amazon, it's probably a problem for everybody. And that was kind of the origin there.
So, this idea that you might go do something on your own, but then there's the reality, the leap to actually go do it. Was there a moment, was there something that gave you the confidence, if you will, to make that jump and start Rich Context?
Inherently, there was one big thing, which I told myself that after 5 years at Coca-Cola, I was going to make a career decision. Either I was going to stay and maybe move, or I was going to leave the company and go somewhere else. And so I already mentally was prepared to make a decision. However, as you kind of progress through that, and we see that there's an opportunity to create a business, I had a new decision to make, which was either I'm young enough now, either I leave and start this, and if it doesn't work out, I bet someone will pay me more money to do the same job I was doing at Coke in the market that we were in at the time. And so if all else fails, I think I was able to I was hopeful I could get another job doing very similar work, because again, the world of e-commerce and digital and all that was very nascent, and I had a unique skill set that was being developed still in the market.
What was your biggest surprise or learning when you initially went from some of these very large corporations to doing your own company?
Being uncomfortable with how much free time I had, right? Like we didn't have clients for the first few months. And so there's a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of time just on your own, trying to figure out, the right proposition, trying to figure out the branding of a company. How do you pilot ideas with brands and try to have breakthrough moments? But also just like there's sometimes where there was just nothing to do on a certain day. And you had to either like get comfortable doing nothing or finding other ways to kind of exercise your brain. And so, and I say that kind of in jest, but there was, truly we're like, okay, what do we do now? Do we just go outside and like shoot hoops for a bit? Right. Like we don't know what else to do. And so, yeah, those first few months were a very interesting pace change from where corporate life was.
How did you go about getting your first few customers?
we initially built our company on a promise of better content delivered to PDPs at retailers. But we carved out a specific space, which was not just copywriting and images, but how do you get better enhanced content that always matches what's in the market? And I'll use Coke as an example. Coca-Cola themselves would support March Madness and fall football and all these big sporting events and all these big kind of tentpole events. But if you were a shopper that ever went to a retailer's website and you were on their webpage, you would never see those same marketing materials. You would never see that packaging update reflecting on the website. And so all we wanted to do was identify some of those brands and say, hey, you're putting all this effort into in-store materials, into advertising, on all these things that are happening in the sphere, but the same experience doesn't match online. We can help you do that. And we were fortunate that we had a couple folks like General Mills, Smuckers, Samsung, right out of the gate saying like, this is a huge opportunity for us, right? This is when we invest. And so we were just in a position, again, it helps being based in Northwest Arkansas, where you can, within a 10-mile radius, speak to about 600 CPG clients. And we had the ability to get in front of the right people.
So at RichContext, you had this groundbreaking hyphen technology. It was awarded as the top advertising technology by leading advertising publisher The Drum in 2020. Talk to us a little about the technology and some of the capabilities that you built once you had kind of settled on this initial vision for what you wanted to bring to the clients.
Right. So hyphen really pioneered what modern day we call shoppable media, shoppable content. And what we did is we built a platform that allowed brands to customize shops that can be deployed anywhere, any form of media across any device, whether it's social media, programmatic, email, SMS. It didn't matter. It was something that they owned. And the other thing that these shops enabled was a one-click add to cart functionality. And so on one hand, we had CPG companies who would basically contract us to go buy media on their behalf and build these shops. On the other hand, we had retailers that we had relationships with as well, and they would give us access to things like item level and store level data and elements that made these shops very dynamic. And so, for example, Hyphen also knew a user's location. So if a user clicked on an ad, Hyphen would render, and if a promoted item from that CPG or that manufacturer was out of stock, we would dynamically replace it with an in-stock item. So these are things that were ideas we were working on, in 2017, 2018, that became incredibly relevant in 2020 during COVID, as an example. And so we actually, Hyphen as a product, basically floated the entire toilet paper and paper towel industry, where those products were so hard to find. Hyphen was able to kind of allow advertisers to keep advertising and only promote where those products were available.
So in some ways, a true lifesaver for consumers, because I remember those days we had household items that you could not find, and you'd go in search of them and you couldn't get to it. You thought it would be in stock, here it wasn't, and you had this great enabler to kind of unlock the value of this data.
Yeah, it's interesting now too when you think about where we are today with Accenture. Hyphen today is still an asset that is alive and belongs now to a company that's approaching $70 billion in revenue, right? So it's a continued asset. It's a platform that lives and breathes even beyond anything we'll have ever done to it.
Amazing. Speaking of Accenture and things that we build that live on, RichContext was acquired by the Stable in 2020, and then the Stable was acquired by Accenture in 2022. I have to say, it's pretty incredible that your company was acquired not just once, Billy, but twice. How does that work?
When we were acquired by the Stable in 2020, we were at the peak of just rapid growth. Right. We had a platform. We had the thing that brands are looking for to say, how do I promote my items online, and how do I make them easily shoppable for this delivery and pickup service that's becoming very prevalent in the market? And so we had a lot of inbound interest from people that would have been strategic partners and were interested in an acquisition. But we decided to go ahead and just pause the conversations. Let's just grow. It was interesting in how we met the stable, because it was a completely organic interaction. We were just trying to get new business with an agency based out of Minneapolis to have more integration into Target. Little did we know that they were just becoming growth equity backed and about to go on a bit of an acquisition spree. And so whenever we ended up having a conversation with them, they effectively gave us a deal and a timeline that was incredible that we kind of had to say yes to. Part of that, though, was we were able to stay on the cap table, right, and roll some equity forward and make a bet, that the agency that was being built there was indeed going to be a disruptor, and that is what it turned out to be. They went on to acquire 4 more companies after us. We grew the agency to about 500 or so people across a range of markets, really doing end-to-end commerce services. And then a year and a half later, Accenture was kind of looking for this type of shop, and another deal was made. So yeah, one of those rare situations where it pays off to roll some equity forward, and you get, a couple bites of the apple, as they say.
Just to parse apart the pieces that you mentioned, cap table, rolling equity, things like that, in a way that's talking about how you can still stay on as an owner, at least in part, while the company continues to grow.
Exactly.
Okay. So amazing story, and also a really fast timeline, 2020 and then 2022. Would you tell us about what you're up to now at Accenture, and what's similar about your role now to what you've been doing, and also perhaps what's different?
So today at Accenture, I lead commerce innovation. And so there's a particular focus on digital, on media, on retail, which is really the background and what RichContext and the stable really became known for. So the primary job of my team is to work both with brands and retailers to help them see around the corner on whether that's new technology, modernized ways of working, all that consultancy speak, right? The reality is that's a new muscle for me. I'm not a consultant. I have always been someone who has been more of a solution provider, someone who adds value immediately. We have something to sell you, and we can deploy it tomorrow. But there is something that's interesting now, though, that is, while the work that we're doing in theory and in practice is largely the same, it's the same topics, the way we're going about it is different. And so, transitioning from solution provider to consultant and using kind of real world experience to have a conversation, with CEOs and CMOs now versus, VPs and directors maybe that we would have been working with in the past. And so it's been interesting for me on a personal level to be a bit more introspective and think about, why have you been successful? What have you experienced in your career? And how can you take all of those elements and kind of package it up in a way that says, now let me help you with your business strategy as it relates to retail media, as it relates to digital marketing. And that's been a huge growth experience and very rewarding.
Is there a recent conversation that stands out for you with some of these CEOs and other leaders in this digital space?
There's always a few. One of the more recent ones is really just trying to navigate, not retail media. There's a lot of people talking about retail media, but the nuances of how should you invest around things like data clean rooms and things of that nature. And there's a lot of interest in doing so. But what I think a lot of brands are running into is a lot of retailers don't have a lot of knowledge on the subject. They want to sell you something, right? They want you to participate, but they're not bringing a competency, a technical competency. And so, yeah, there's a bit of frustration, and sometimes your role is to say like, yes, that is frustrating, and this is what we need to do to solve that. And sometimes it's to be a little more hands-on and say like, well, technically, this is actually what you need to do, and like we just need to have a different conversation with the retailer.
Great insight. So really bringing both that strategic knowledge, but also some technical acumen to these conversations.
You got it.
Now, I had the good fortune to work with you at my prior company, Content Analytics. We partnered on content health scoring, some content creation. What's changed kind of in the e-commerce landscape, and especially in product content, PIM systems, things like that? And what's different now versus perhaps what you saw a few years back?
Yeah, This one's really interesting to me. PDPs are having a bit of a renaissance, it seems like right now, in as relates to a renewed sense of traffic driving by way of retail media. And when we first started kind of into this space around content years ago, you and I, there was just such a focus on getting the right image to show up. Right? Just give me something that's not a 10-year-old package, and be consistent in terms of a copy, enhanced content, but make sure you're just participating. And so it was really about participation scores, like what percentage of your pages have XYZ content.
Yeah.
And what's changed since then, in large part, is not just participating, but like, are we optimized the right way? Are we optimized based on sales growth and search rank and all these other elements that we can measure differently? And then embedded within that, though, is just the automated component of it. So content scoring was where you were ahead of the game. Now it's just that on with a layer of here's your score, but it's not a pass fail anymore, right? Whenever we first started, it was, does your item description have 25 characters, yes or no? And if it was yes, then you got a green check mark.
Right.
And so now it's like more around, are these the right characters? Are we testing the right elements? Are they having the right impact on sales? And all of that is largely automated, and their suggestions are automated. And so, but the thing that has stayed the same throughout all of that is just the mandate for accuracy, because data today has a bunch of layers of APIs on top of it, and they feed a lot of different things other than just a product detail page. And the more you have, digital experiences, whether that is pricing related, whether that's advertising related, interstitial, shoppable interstitial related, all these things feed off the same base. And so you never know where that data might pop up. And if you've got a funky, item description or an attribute that's off, it could really ruin a different touch point as well.
Will you parse apart the work around automation and just talk to our listeners a little bit about what that means, what kind of automation you're seeing brands take advantage of currently?
Some interesting things being built, where that's on top of on top of a chat GPT type of function, but effectively the scraping of content, the measurement of content that does one thing, which is here's what we have published. Here's what a specific retailer suggest is the right thing to have the right content scores for us, so their own rubric. And there for the longest time, you kind of had brands saying, I have an Amazon custom content strategy, I have a Walmart custom content strategy, and then I have an everybody else strategy. And so with levels of automation, you've got, you don't have to have humans that go in and make all these decisions. You can basically say, here's a retailer specific rubric that measures success. Are we successful there or not? And then, have some machines go check on that for you. Then what they can also do is make suggestions based on what's your share of search, what's your share of sales. Are these things impacted by different levers you're pulling within content, within different pieces of content, and then make those edits for you. So again, it was a heavy lift when humans used to have to go in and go every day, audit their own pages, make sure the right content was there, make manual updates, and kind of go through these phases. And it's true today in terms of automating that, not just for the copy that's being written, but also for the expanded images that are available and changing backgrounds. You see work that Amazon's doing with some of that. And it's really interesting how you can scale content quickly. And for some brands, that might be off limits for them, right? If you think about, a brand that has a lot of equity in their packaging and maybe they still want some hands-on. But say you are a rug manufacturer, right? And you've got thousands of SKUs, but you just want to show them on different floor, different textiles and things like that. But all that can be scaled, and production costs are lower, and it's heavily automated.
Such great insights. Talk to us about the other part of the ecosystem, if you will. You've mentioned that product detail pages are having a bit of a renaissance, if you will, and the retail media is one of the big drivers of that. What are you seeing there in some of your conversations with CEOs at retailers and at brands?
We're in the middle of all of it, and it's tricky right now. You've got retailers who are truly trying to monetize things, right? And first and foremost, it's that, right? How can we find incremental revenue? you've got brands who are in a position where, with cookies deprecating and access to data, access to better audiences, that world is kind of waning in terms of the legacy ways of doing that. And all things are pointed toward retailers today. But I would like to draw a line between Amazon and everybody else, right? The thing about retailers today, and Amazon in particular, is 100% of your business is done through Amazon.com, right? So it's an online business, and you invest there because there's high traffic, high interest, and you're truly investing to try to get your products in front of the right shoppers who are searching. On the everybody else side, where you've got a brick and mortar presence, still roughly 90% of your business or so happens physically in a store. And you've got a website that doesn't have the same level of traffic. It doesn't have the same level of interest from buyers. However, there is a strong, highly leveraged, sense of like, you have to participate in retail media. And so, it's a curious position right now for brands, because you're making an investment decision that isn't just predominantly based on pure media results. It's based on a larger discussion you're having around your entire business and all merchandising decisions that are happening primarily in store. And so brought within that, is just loads of complicated questions and things that are hard to measure, things that are direct and indirect in terms of measuring. And so, yeah, we spend a lot of time helping brands navigate that and figure out where value is or isn't, in the world where you have a lot of competing incentives.
So in this world of competing incentives, your advice, insights for a brand manager, someone who's going into the retail media discussion, some pretty big investments being looked at in this space, big dollars. What are some rules for the road, if you will, when they're thinking about and having those conversations?
Your default shouldn't be yes, because there's going to be a lot of asks out there around how much you should be investing. And what's getting committed to is a number that doesn't yet have strategy attached to it. It doesn't have deliverables and expectations attached to it. And I think what we saw in the early stages of retail media growth were non-media people making decisions and committing to large sums of investment. And so that's kind of been changing a bit, right? Where there's more media people, there's more agency people kind of in the room that are helping to guide a lot of these conversations. But I would just challenge anybody in general in this space is to do your best to remain objective on like, what's really going on here? What are we trying to accomplish? Does this really help move the needle or not? Relative to our from a sales standpoint in our business, from our relationship with the retailer, all these things are in consideration, but having some objectivity and forming your own opinion is of high value, because if you kind of relegate yourself to what has become quite the echo chamber in the market, it makes it sound like retail media is just the best thing ever, right? Like, because it's growing, when there's a harsh reality that a lot of the growth isn't based on media on its own merits, right? It's all these other things that kind of like amount to large investments on behalf of brands. And so stay objective and probably bring a larger team in, and try to get strategic early versus committing to investment early.
Love it. Such great insights. Well, we've covered a lot of really, really interesting topics today. Before we wrap up, I want to take one more moment to talk about what you're looking at in terms of AI, as well as other technologies, capabilities, themes over the next year and beyond. What's kind of on deck and on your mind?
Look, I am bullish on AI, and not because it is a buzzword or anything like that, but I think we're just on the front end of it. And I genuinely love how the general population is familiarizing themselves with things like ChatGPT and getting comfortable having conversations with and getting information in a different way. And it's allowing it to become a bit more mainstream. So, call it the approachability of AI now, I think, is going to expedite adoption from an enterprise perspective, right? It's all based on consumers. Do consumers understand it? Are consumers familiar with it? Are they going to be able to interact? And is it going to be able to add value? And the answer is becoming yes faster than I expected. And so I am really, really excited about that. And a lot of our work, Accenture has made a huge bet on that. A lot of people are making a big bet on that. And a lot of our work is helping manufacturers, retailers, and others kind of sort out what does that mean for them. And it's not something that's off the shelf. It's something that is unique to their relationship with their consumers and expectations for growth. And so, yeah, I'm very confident about where this is going, and it's coming way faster than I thought.
And I think you're right. If as the consumer, I have this expectation and this familiarity with it, I then want to know, how can I put this to work in my business, in my company, in my investments that I'm making as a business leader. So super interesting area. Well, I've got a couple of fun closing questions I'd love to ask you before we wrap up, if you're up for this.
Let's do it.
All right. So first one is, when it comes to your professional life, and I know it's hard to pick only two, but which two people have inspired you the most?
There are two people that I can pick out. It's funny though. Honestly, growing up, I was taught to draw a lot of inspiration by learning from other people's mistakes. You know what I mean? And just like be very observant and versus only what people are good at. But there's a couple instances though, both while I was working at Coke, that I thought just kind of changed me forever. And so one of those was the guy who hired me. His name's David Rosen. And he just truly taught me how to have a backbone and like always pay attention and always form an opinion in every meeting, every room that you're in. But he also had this very unique Northeastern way of saying a lot without saying anything at all. and there's an example. Once I asked him, I was like, hey, I got to leave early. It was on a Friday, but I had family coming into town. And he just kind of looked at me, and I was standing in his office. And he just stared at me, didn't say anything, kind of shrugged. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to leave now, But what he was saying, again, without saying anything, was like, dude, I don't care. Like, if all your stuff is done, then go. Like, I'm not keeping tabs on you. And so just the fact that, he was able just to treat me like an adult, right? Kind of changed the way that I would end up managing people too. And that became like the basis of a really cool relationship. The next one was ultimately was going to be my boss at Coke as well for a few years. He is now the CEO at Mr. Beast Feastables company. Incidentally, his name's Alex Zigliera. So if anybody out there is listening and knows AZ, he's a brand guy. All right. And one of the things that he, laser focused on me was developing my own personal brand. Right. And how do you value every piece of work you create, every slide you build in PowerPoint, every deck you're presenting, as if it had your own personal logo on it. And so that point of view, like, completely contextualize all of my thinking around the pride I have in my work, projecting aspirations through that work, whether that's, the quality design, my vocals, even subtle aesthetics. And I'll tell you a funny story on that one. We had our first one-on-one, and he went through everything performance-wise. You're crushing it. You're doing this great. Proud of you. This is awesome. His one knock on me, he's like, have you ever worked with a tailor? And he's like, because we have to do something about those pants. I was like, what are you talking about? But it was in jest, kind of, but it truly was like hey man, everything you do is your brand. And that kind of forever changed my mentality.
Wow. What great insights and things to really, really take to heart. I love those. Well, those are amazing. When you do get the time outside of work and family, what are some of the hobbies you like to spend your time on?
Yeah, I love traveling a lot. I love to play golf, even golf when traveling. If those two things coincide, even better. But beyond that, it's summer times, it's wake surfing at the lake, and in the wintertime, it's skiing in the mountains.
Great use of the outdoors and great activities. If folks want to get in touch with you online on the internet, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, it's best just to track me down on LinkedIn. I'll be available, and just ping me and we can chat.
Billy, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. So many great insights, thoughts, and amazing stories. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Cheers, Dave.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Sierra Nevada, Revlon, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.